tampering, whether it's obstruction of justice, or whether it's perjury, those are still federal crimes, and they carry big weight.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. If there's nothing to hide, why the necessity in lying about it? And if it's one person or two person, you say, maybe it's a coincidence. It's a number of people. That's troubling. So somebody like me that wants to give the benefit of the doubt and say, I haven't seen the there yet, this is unsettling to me, the fact that so many folks have lied.
It's true, and also, Jimmy, with all due respect, your bar is criminality, okay? And when we look at the mandate to the special counsel, Mike, and you guys both know this, the mandate says you look for information about coordination and contacts with anything to do with Russian interference. And of course, the special counsel statute, that this all derives from says that he's looking for crimes. But he's not looking just for crimes, he's looking for information. And I've never looked at a felony as the bar of responsible behavior for a president. Anything less, Mike, is okay. The lying has always bothered me most. I have not seen the criminality. I've never felt that we needed it. I've told people early on, collusion is not a crime, it's a behavior. And it can exist without a conspiracy, therefore there won't be any charge, but it still could be very wrong, Mike, and that's why we need to see this report. It could tell an ugly tale of people knowing things, doing things they shouldn't have, and lying about it.
I absolutely agree with you, Chris. And here's the thing, is that everybody that's got ensnared in the special counsel's investigation that has been charged with a crime, it's always been about, to some degree, about lying about their relationship with the Russians. Now, in Cohen, there's not only that, but there are other examples, other crimes that he was charged with that leads you to wonder. But all of those folks who have engaged in lying about their connections with the Russians, and I'll tell you why this Stone thing was so important. The reason they went in that house and took all that material is they did get electronic data they probably would not have gotten if there had been a soft
right, that wasn't just an arrest.
Court in a couple of weeks.
It was also a search. Good point. And Jimmy, to your point, Jimmy's got a good op-ed on about the case that, look, it looks dramatic, but this is what it looks like when the feds come to your door. We saw it with Cohen, we saw it with Manafort, and fair point that Mike just told you, this was a search and an arrest, okay? So let's put that intrigue is undeserved. Go read Jimmy's op-ed about it if you want more. But Jimmy, the cache of stuff. What I don't understand is the feds, according to the indictment, they have what they need already to prove the misstatements. Why were they so hot and heavy? And what do you make of the fact that they found like FBI case files and search warrants on his hard drive?
Chris, the description from the special prosecutor's office is complex and voluminous. So they have a ton of things that they've got to sort through. I think the term was mega terabytes. So they're looking through all those type of things. Look, they're concerned about communications, who talked to who and when. That is going to take an inordinately long time for them to sort through and to get to the bottom of. So we've got to give that time. That's not going to be finished next week or next month. I think they're cautioning everybody to tap the brakes again and be careful because this is going to take time to go through all of this thing. That's why they executed a search warrant. They didn't want anything to be destroyed. They didn't want anything to be deleted. That was the purpose in doing the raid the way that they did.
Of course, we thought that was going to happen when they got Weiner's laptop, and then it was done like a day later. Jimmy and Mike, I couldn't ask for people that are better at keeping us straight, keeping us focused on what matters, and keep it going forward. Gentlemen, thank you for coming in tonight for me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for having us.
So just as we started with these two guys, a brand new interview from the president was published by the New York Times. He's weighing in on Roger Stone, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, and why his presidency is a big loser. Maggie Haberman was one of the reporters who talked with him. She's going to join us next. We have some breaking news. President Trump is calling talks about the border wall a waste of time in a new interview with the New York Times. He talked about Roger Stone, Kamala Harris. He even talked about why the presidency is a financial loser for him. Maggie Haberman is one of the two reporters who spoke to him in the Oval Office. She joins us now by phone. Maggie, you got me?
Chris, I got you.
Great. So how did the president greet you?
Politely. He was, I hate when we do too much mood music here, but he was in a very, personable and good mood. It was I have to say, Chris, and I've interviewed him several times over the last few years, and a couple of times in the Oval Office. He was among the most sort of conventional, I would say, that I have seen him in quite some time. He was pretty calm. He was answering most questions directly. There was relatively little for him attempts to go off the record, and he answered a wide range of questions.
Good. It's just always interesting because he had been trash talking you so much. It never ceases to amaze me how he can be nice to someone's face when he's been trashing them. I've experienced the same thing myself. Maggie, let's get to the content.
I am aware of that.
Let's get to the content. Roger Stone, okay? He says about Roger Stone, you or Peter Baker asked him about whether or not he knew anything about what Stone was doing with WikiLeaks and the Democratic emails that were stolen, or did he direct anyone? No, I didn't. I never did. He said of speaking with Mr. Stone on the subject. Did he ever direct anyone to get in touch with Mr. Stone about WikiLeaks? Never did. What was your takeaway about his level of confidence in his answer?
I mean, it was very specific and to the point. There was no ambiguity whatsoever. As you know, this is a president who likes to leave himself wiggle room on any number of topics. He did not leave himself any here. We obviously can't read his mind, and we can't read into the past. But he was emphatic that this was not he was not the person who was being referred to in this Mueller indictment of Roger Stone. He took, I should note, again, great pains to praise Roger Stone, said he liked him, called him a quote-unquote character, said that he thought that the FBI raid on his home was excessive, said that he thinks that he saw that Roger had praised him, the president, and had said that he would not bear false witness, and he said he thought that people, quote-unquote, respect that.
Anything about a pardon?
That did not come up, but he has said in the past that he isn't going to rule it out, and I didn't anticipate he was going to say anything different when we asked him here.
I want your head on the two hard-to-believes. Hard to believe that his oldest advisor was doing this stuff, obviously, on his behalf and to help his campaign, and he knew nothing about it. And it's hard to believe that someone as savvy as Roger Stone would be this brazen in the face of the feds if he didn't think he'd be rescued. What's your take on those two?
Well, I think my take overall, again, without my take on the indictment, to be clear, in terms of Stone is, I have no idea what he said to Congress specifically, and I have no idea. I was not present for the 5 counts of making false statements. In terms of the Randy Credico piece, that relationship is so strange and has included so many blow-ups and reconciliations that when he says this is taken out of context, I tend to listen to that. In terms of the president, and Roger, the president took pains to remind us that Roger was not officially with the campaign at that point. That is true. Roger, as you know, quit the campaign around August or September of 2015, but he is the president's longest-serving, off and on political advisor. Is it possible something was going on that, Roger, again, of course, denies it, just to be clear, but is it possible if something was going on that the president didn't know about it? It is harder, I think, to see the president not asking anyone to inquire about what WikiLeaks might have. That is, I think, harder than I could see a world where he didn't discuss it personally with Roger. But it is harder to see a world. Again, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. But that's a more plausible scenario where he asks an aide to go check in with Roger.
And as we learned today with what he said about the intel chiefs, you can never underestimate this president's ability to abuse the truth because it works for him. He thinks in the moment. Let me ask you about something else here that I'm reading the piece as we go along. Once again, written nice and tight, really gets everything out there well. Thank you very much. I lost massive amounts of money doing this job, the president said. This is not the money. This one of the great losers of all time. Fortunately, I don't need money. This is one of the great losers of all time. But they'll say that somebody from some country stayed at a hotel, and I'll say, yeah, but I lose. I mean, the numbers are incredible. What was he talking about?
I think he was saying that, yes, it's true that there are a lot of people who stay at his hotel, and he hears lots of numbers like that. But he was also saying that overall, I've heard several people affiliated with the Trump organization say this, that this has not been good for business. I thought the phrase, this is whatever it was, the biggest loser of all time, it was really a stark thing to say about the presidency. But he tends to view these things in zero-sum terms.
It's very interesting take for him. It almost kind of speaks to his regret that he's not making more money while in office. And obviously the presidency should be the opposite of profitability.
He seems surprised at what he said has been a loss. That is true.
Yeah, right. So let me ask you something else. He goes after Nancy Pelosi. What she's doing is wrong. He teases you about national emergency. No mention of him shutting the government down again, which I thought was very interesting. And he also, the common refrain of, Rosenstein told my lawyers, I'm not the target. I'm not a subject. Now, of course, that doesn't mean he's not going to be implicated in what types of activities are outlined in this report. The other thing I think that's going to get interesting pickup from people is pretty flattering about Kamala Harris. He may not have said her name right, but what did you take away from his, pretty nice suggestions about the senator from California?
I think a couple of things. I think that his aides are, are watching a generational challenge, and I think that she is one of them. I don't think she's more in excess of concern for them than, say, Beto O'Rourke possibly running. But I do think that, they are mindful that she appears to have some energy, and she appears to know how to structurally put together a large crowd, to impress at the outset. And I think they're very aware of that. Warren is going to be a specific obsession for him, and he talked about her in his interview with us. But he's clearly aware that there is activity around Kamala Harris. I think he is trying not to be disrespectful. He did not deploy any of his usual nicknames or anything like that.
Not yet. He succeeded in being respectful, and also you make a good point. He has such distaste for Warren that complimenting Harris is kind of a way to put her down indirectly.
Exactly.
Maggie, what a well-timed interview for you and Peter Baker. Thank you so much for hopping on the phone with us and giving it to us hot off the presses.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Maggie Haberman, everybody, and this is going to be very interesting. Remember, when asked directly by two New York Times reporters whether or not he knew what Stone was doing, whether he talked to him about it, whether he had anything to do with directing him on it, no, no, no. Those are the answers from the President of the United States directly to the New York Times. All right, so from Mueller and the battle that's going on with him to the battle over how much wall to build on the border. Now, no matter what happens with this negotiation, is there any good argument for another shutdown? Because it is being dangled. Our great debate on that next.
This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, you just heard the breaking news from President Trump's new Oval Office interview. To hear it from him and Speaker Pelosi, border policy negotiations are in as bad a place as ever. Listen.
There's not going to be any wall money in the legislation.
The problem is, if they don't give us a wall, it doesn't work. Without a wall, it doesn't work.
All right, so if there is no deal by February 15th, that's this 3-week continuing resolution that they had, what happens? Starting point for the great debate. Let's bring in Bakari Sellers and Niger Innes. Niger, can you make a case that it would be okay to shut down the government again after what we just lived through?
I think that the president ought to use that weapon in his toolbox in the negotiations. The fact is you have a fundamental difference of opinion and philosophy when it comes to securing our border. You have a Democratic Party that is largely controlled or motivated by far, far left progressives that believe that ICE agents are a bigger threat to national security than illegal immigration, a bigger threat to national security than Monday, what happened when border agents captured some MS-13 gangbangers. And when you have that fundamental difference of opinion, you have Nancy Pelosi saying that walls are immoral.
But
then
why
yes,
does
the
that
president ought to
make
use everything he can.
punishing workers okay?
It's Chris, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll let Bakari get in because your silence was deafening, Niger. Why does that make punishing
no, that
workers?
question was to me.
No, I'll come
Sorry
back to you,
about
Niger.
that.
Bakari, why would that make punishing workers okay?
It doesn't, and I'm not going to engage Niger in that sensationalistic hyperbole that he went, the rant that he went on. But I will say that the president of the United States should not use 800,000 people who work extremely hard, many of them Border Patrol agents, Coast Guards, every single day, the U.S. attorneys, those people who work hard to enforce our laws as pawns. I think that's misguided. I think it hurt him the first time. I think it's devastating the second time if he does it. and I think that helped seal his defeat in 2020. But more importantly, I mean, I think Democrats are taking a stand on what immigration problems we really have. I mean, I think that Niger and other Republicans have to understand that the most illegal drugs in this country come through legal ports of entry. That's why we have to give a shout out today to our Border Patrol agents for a huge fentanyl bust at a port of entry. Thank you so much. It could have affected 57 million Americans, but they found it at a port of entry.
And they only put 2% of the vehicles through X-ray. And that's why they want the X-ray and the text so much for the ports of entry.
And that's why we need, and exactly, because you went to the border, many people have been examining this issue. That's why we need to make sure that we have 21st century immigration policies, not some edifice to memorialize the presidency of Donald Trump.
I'm with you on that, but let me follow with you on one quick thing, Bakari. Democrats have always funded physical barriers at the border. The proof is happening probably right now. They're building new bollard fencing down there right now, repairing other stuff. That's money that Democrats had a hand in giving them money. Why say no money for the wall? It makes it seem tit for tat. You guys have always given money. It's just about how much and where.
It's always been a part of a larger program, a larger deal. Democrats have always pushed for comprehensive immigration reform. The fact is this: Republicans and Donald Trump thought they were slick, and they got their card pulled by Nancy Pelosi and others. They took away the protection for Dreamers, DACA recipients, and TPS, those under temporary protected status. They took away that protection and then say, very much so, and then say, I'll give it back to you on a temporary fashion if you give me $5.6 billion.
Right.
So you're going to rob me and then give me back what you took from me and say I should apologize to you? I mean, that doesn't fly anywhere. And so what Democrats are doing are staying hard and fast and say, Donald Trump, do not shut the government down, but make sure that we have 21st century immigration policies and make sure those individuals who know this country to be their home get to stay here and get a right to citizenship.
All right, Niger, help me understand this now, because I'm not seeing it the way you are. And usually I'm pretty good at seeing where you guys are going to come from on this stuff. I get the problem. I get the frustration. I also get the need. I believe the men and women who keep us safe on the border, that they need more physical barriers. I do not believe that they see it as a panacea. I don't even think they think it's of paramount importance. I think they want other things more, and they see other things as more critical to our safety. But put that to the side. This is what do you do if there's an impasse, and I can't believe you guys would want to take another hit after what you just saw happen in the shutdown. It had to hurt the president with the base.
Well, no, actually, it did not hurt the president.
We saw it in poll numbers.
A recent, well, it depends on which poll you're reading. I just saw a poll that showed the president's approval rating in the mid-40s, the low to mid-40s, which is essentially kind of where it's been. It's been kind of static.
Yeah,
Look,
hard to believe.
Bakari creates this false choice that it's either border security funding, be it steel slats or
it's
wall,
bollard fencing. There's no reason to call it anything else. That's all it is.
It is other innovations. It is not either or. It is both. It is all of the above.
Yeah, but it's how much of each.
It is a comprehensive approach that
yeah,
uses
but the president
technology.
doesn't say that, Niger. The president doesn't say that.
That's
what you're
he did
saying
in the
is
New York
reasonable.
Times interview. He actually said
no,
it's an all of the above strategy.
But
No, hold on. Hold on, guys. Let's just be clear. All right, let's just be clear what started all this mess to begin with, all right? During the campaign, he came up with a simple solution to a complex problem. I'm going to build a wall. He pretended with a farce that there was nothing on the southern border and he was going to build this brand new thing and Mexico was going to pay for it. It was a farce. He never has pushed the technology, the X-ray, the staff, the judges, the accommodations, the rules, the way he does the wall. Niger, be fair. He is the one who has made it a single point issue, not the Democrats.
But also, let me jump in here because Democrats have also stated, I mean, just recently, last year we stated that we would give him $1.6 billion for this wall, as well as other proposals to make sure that we had comprehensive immigration reform. Donald Trump doesn't want anything else. Donald Trump wants $5.6 billion for a wall, period. And the problem that I have is not only do you want to shut down government and affect real Americans who are working hard every day to enforce the policies which make our country safer, but you also are not focusing on the real issues. And we actually have real infrastructure problems in this country right now, people not drinking clean water, et cetera. So why are we going to spend money that he said Mexico was going to pay for in the first place? So if Niger and anyone else can just sit here and flat out admit the president of the United States lied, I think we'll be able to move the ball down the field a little bit. But everybody wants to contort themselves in the pretzels, making excuse for someone who lied about a problem that we need to be coming together on.
Well, what I will admit is that the Democratic Party has an element, those 4 freshmen that wrote a letter to Nancy Pelosi, and she's taking very seriously, that there needs to be ICE reform. Okay, you have presidential candidates that compared ICE to the KKK.
What
That
are
is,
you
of
talking
course,
about?
Senator Kamala Harris that did
What are you?
that.
Her
All right,
name is Kamala.
So you have
Her
this
name is Kamala.
Kamala.
It's
Kamala.
Kamala.
I'm sorry, Kamala Harris. But she compared her to the KKK. You have Nancy Pelosi in her so-called comprehensive border security wants to freeze the number of ICE agents that we would put on the southern border while giving more money to migrants that are coming into the country, which of course could be an incentive for more illegal migration to take place within our country.
It's also not an argument
That's
the
absurd,
president
and you're
makes.
conflating.
The president doesn't make
that's
any of
absurd,
these
and
arguments, just so you know.
You're also conflating Border Patrol and ICE agents, et cetera, and that argument was absurd. I do believe that we need to make sure that we reform ICE and reform ICE to get back to its original mission, to make sure that we have customs and enforcement, and we make sure we do it in a just way, and we make sure that people actually have due process. That's one thing. But the other thing, to get back to the point of the original conversation and make sure we get back to the border, we have issues down there. We have immigration issues that are not as simple as a wall. In fact, if I give you $5.6 billion today, and you get to go build your wall and sign Donald Trump's name on it and make it out of gold plates or slats or whatever, we are still going to have an illegal immigration problem in this country. We are still going to have drugs coming in through ports of entry. We are still going to have an asylum problem here, and not to mention the caravan that ain't never showed up since the election. I mean, we're going to have issues to still deal with in an immigration problem, some real and some fake as the caravan that you all created. So I'm saying that we need to have a common sense approach.
It's both and all of the above.
I don't disagree.
I trust
You're just
the
not
United
hearing
States
that from the
Congress.
president. All right, gentlemen, I got to leave it there.
You're not.
We agree on one thing.
Thank you.
This is a big-ass problem with lots of different facets, and if you just focus on one the way we have with this physical barrier issue, we're never going to get anywhere. And by the way,
Amen.
We haven't. But to both of you, thank you for arguing the points. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Now, when I hear the president disrespect his hand-picked intel chiefs and then lie about it later, I see another mistake that the president's going to be judged by. But when a former intelligence chief sees such flagrant actions, he has a very different concern that you're going to want to hear. Former Intel Chief Jim Clapper, next. Intel chiefs as passive and naive that they had to go back to sandcoats, met in the Oval Office. He explained away the public contradiction.
They said they were totally, it was taken out of context. So what I do is I'd suggest that you call them. They said it was fake news.
Fake news? That's what the president claims they said. Their testimonies were televised. Their written assessments were public, saying that time would prove him writing mendacity, but also National Intelligence Director.
Thanks, Chris.
First, the easy question. Percent chance that Coates and Haspel would say, right? Why would they say that when they know it was from live testimony?
Well, they wouldn't say it because, for the very reason you cite, because they were on television for all to see what they said and did. And buttressed by the way, the unclassified written assessment that was submitted to the committee.
So what bothers you about this? It's not new for us to have to expose the President of the United States for lying. I don't think he's ever told a bigger whopper than this one because it's so obviously untrue and it compromises these two people who really need to have their integrity intact because of the nature of their work. So your concern is?
Well, on a number of levels, Chris. First, just let me make an overarching comment here, is that policymakers, to include policymaker number one, that is the president, always have the prerogative of accepting, rejecting, or ignoring intelligence. They can do that. I think if they do it repetitively over time for multiple issues, they imperil the nation and the presidency in this case. So that's kind of concern number one. I'm reminded of the old saw about God loves drunks, babies in the United States of America. And we've been singularly blessed in that we haven't had a major international confrontation in the last few years, particularly the last two during this administration. And I'm meaning something of the magnitude, God forbid, of a 9/11 attack or a nuclear confrontation with the likes of Russia or China. In a situation like that, the president is going to need his intelligence community, and his gut will not be sufficient to sort out what's fact and what isn't. So you need trust in a situation like that, and that trust has to go both ways. And so what's been compromised here, in my view, is first, in the eyes of the public, the trust that the public has in the intelligence community, the trust of, and what this has done to the employees, the rank and file across the intelligence community, when they see three leaders like this, particularly Dan Coates, insulted as they were. And by the way, Dan, maybe that was perhaps one of his finest hours, because he forthrightly and honestly and straightforwardly told the committee and the public what the facts were about intelligence threats around the world. And then, of course, you have to wonder about what do our foreign partners think, particularly those who share intelligence with us. And then I worry about the leaders themselves who are, could easily reach the point where, hey, I don't need this aggravation, and I'm out of here, which would be a huge loss in all three of those cases. So on a number of levels, this is very disturbing. And of course, most people wait years to do revisionist history. President Trump, does it the next day. And this is a manifestation of his living in a no-fact zone reality bubble all to himself.
Right. I'm going to make an argument at the end of the show, as I do every night, about how I am really impressed by his lie today, and I believe that it is a window into his future in terms of what this Mueller probe is going to reveal. It's not about crimes, it's about credibility. Let me ask you something. The blocked numbers, I'm happy it leaked. I'm happy it came out, because the suggestion was the blocked numbers were the president. People were using it as a potential smoking gun. It was on TV all the time with pundits getting ready to cash in on it. They were wrong. It wasn't the president. However, now we expect Don Jr. to jump up and down, but for people to say, well, that ends that, doesn't end it for me. Does it end it for you?
No, it doesn't. I mean, frankly, Chris, for me, this hyperventilating about that phone call is kind of a little overwrought, in my opinion. And the fact that it apparently wasn't to the president or the candidate at the time, I don't think it has that much bearing on
just because it wasn't him
overarching
doesn't mean he didn't know.
Was the president aware of the meeting, whether he heard about it via this phone call or not? And what is his complicity here? That to me is a much bigger issue, and who the other communicant was in the phone call is of lesser importance, at least in my mind.
I could have done a little bit more digging and given the people the names tonight, but I don't want to do that, because I'm told they don't have anything to do with the probe, and why put any more people's lives in the mix on this to be judged on something that's not relevant to the probe overall. Jim Clapper, you are always relevant. Thank you so much for making us smarter on these issues tonight. Well, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Chris, for having me.
Always. All right. The hat, the MAGA hat, it's become so much more than a hat for people on both sides. Now that division reaches a new level in a restaurant, and the conflict will take away your appetite. Next.